Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Twitter space today on World Chain. So we're going to have a really great conversation. We've got a great crew assembled today to talk about World Chain, Optimism, etc. So a really good crew. So in case you missed it, yesterday we actually announced World Chain. It's a blockchain designed for humans, built on OP Stack and part of the Optimism Superchain. Today, we're really excited to kind of dig into what that is a little bit more, why we're building it, what will be possible on it, and then to talk at a little bit higher level about Ethereum and more about the kind of the vision for the Optimism Superchain. So before we get going, I think a round of intros is probably appropriate, especially given the team that we have assembled here. So my name is Stephen Smith. I'm the head of protocol at Tools for Humanity, which is a contributor to the Worldcoin protocol. And as I mentioned, we have a bunch of great folks that are here from Tools for Humanity, Worldcoin Foundation, Optimism Collective. So I'll just kick it off and we'll get going with a brief round of intros. So Ryan, are you on it looks like you're on the space. You want to give us a kind of a brief intro into what you do at the Optimism Collective and your involvement?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm so excited for all of you. I'm excited for Optimism. I'm excited for the Superchain ecosystem. I'm happy to be here. So my name's Ryan Wyatt. I'm the Chief Growth Officer. I'm focused on just contributing to the collective and making sure all ships rise as we focus on OP Stack and the people that are building on it and expanding the Superchain. I was previously at Polygon Labs as the president, and before that, I was the head of gaming at YouTube, and just absolutely love all the work that's being done. And I can't tell you enough how excited I am for today and all the great progress Worldcoin has been making and, the inevitable having its own blockchain. So thanks for having me.
All right. Very good. Yeah, we're super excited too. And we'll talk more about the Superchain in general in a bit. But Liam, I think you're on. You want to give us a brief intro?
Hey, yeah, my name is Liam. I've been working on scaling Ethereum for 7-ish years now. I helped build OP Labs, which is the company that is the core development builder for Optimism. And I'm also an advisor to Worldcoin.
Excellent. Okay, Tiago, I think you're on as well.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Good to see familiar faces on the space and some new ones. Yeah, I'm Tiago. I lead product at Tools for Humanity. So we're the startup that originally incubated Worldcoin. Nowadays, we continue to contribute to the protocol and then build a bunch of products around it, including World App, which is the first wallet that worked with all this stuff. So I'm super excited to talk World Chain.
Excellent. And let's say Remco, I think you're on as well.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Yeah, it's so awesome that we finally got this announcement for World Chain out. We've been thinking and working about this for quite a while now, and also, as we'll see, going through quite some adventures for this. I'm doing the protocol design at the Worldcoin Foundation, and yeah, super excited to talk about this whole adventure.
All right, very good. Yeah, so I could start with a trivia question, like how long have we known we're going to do our rule up? But I think it's really not fair because I think Remco and I are the only ones that could answer it. But it's been about a year, literally, that we were talking about OP Stack and building in this. But we'll get into more about that later. I'm just looking forward to really great conversation today. Quite literally, the collection of people we have here are some of my most favorite people in the world. I really love working with them, really love chatting with them about anything that comes up. Before we get going, just kind of a housekeeping reminder, we will have time at the end for questions. So if you have any specific questions about World Chain, just drop those in the Twitter thread that announced the space, and we'll get to those at the end. So let's just dive straight into World Chain. So let's start with what is World Chain? And why is it being built? And Remco, I'm going to kick that one over to you to kind of get us going.
Yeah, let's start with a little bit of history because this is going to be fun. So the Worldcoin project actually didn't even start out on blockchains immediately on founding. It's actually something that came up slightly later. And one of the first blockchain things it did was actually on the Bitcoin network. All of this was, of course, before launch. I think by the time I joined, it was already clear that Ethereum was going to be the most important infrastructure for these kinds of things. So that was obvious, but it was also very clear immediately that Ethereum, for the foreseeable future, would not possibly be able to host all of humanity and its financial interactions. So it was clear that scaling was going to be a determining factor on the blockchain side for the project. So one of the early things we contributed to was a project called Hubble by the Ethereum Foundation, a very interesting and very little known L2 with some really unique properties. It combines a ZK rollup with an optimistic rollup and takes the best of both worlds. And we've actually run this in production before launch, but with a large number of users, like hundreds of thousands of users. At some point, we're using the Hubble chain as an L2 on Ethereum mainnet, and we got some of the cheapest transaction fees that any L2 achieved. I think we held that record right up until 4844 completely changed the game. But getting ahead of the story here, so after our experiments of Hubble, we realized that, well, a super efficient chain is nice, but we also need a chain that everyone can develop on, that creates an open ecosystem, that supports like all these enormously impactful DeFi projects. So in other words, we need a chain that is EVM compatible, because that just seemed the future. At that time, also, progress on EVM chains seems to be going much faster than expected. I think we all remember that moment when suddenly not one, but like 3 ZK EVMs came out in the span of like a week and a half. So this prompted us to reevaluate and go full steam on EVM compatible chains. For a while, we were running a prototype on Polygon because that was at the time the only EVM compatible chain that could handle the throughput that we required and gave our beta users an experience that would be representative of what they would get on a future chain. And for us, this was very important because we're optimizing for user experience here. So we need to get operating a setting that is like realistic here. After that, we migrated to Optimism mainnet just before launch, so that we actually launched as a proper full-on Ethereum-aligned project. And since then we've grown. On Optimism mainnet, and we're now reached the point where we're like a big chunk of OP mainnet, and it makes sense to go in our own way, become part of the superchain ecosystem, and create a dedicated chain to support our user base and to allow us to have a bit more control over the direction of growth and scaling that happens there. Tiago, do you want to, I don't have the latest numbers here, actually. I know they're very impressive. Do you want to tell more about how big we've grown since launch?
Yeah, for sure. I was actually looking at right before the launch, like all these points in time that you're talking about, like onto how many users we got in each of them. I think that in Hubble, we got all the way to 600,000 users, which is crazy. Then we were for a bit on Polygon, and when we were at about 2 million users, we moved over to OP mainnet. This was like 9 months ago. And then now we're at 10 million users, which is crazy. So now we have more daily active users. We have 2-point-something million daily active users than we have users that had ever downloaded the app at the moment we moved to Optimism. The project has grown quite a bit since then. I think nowadays, on average, it's something like 44% of all the L2 gas on OP mainnet is Worldcoin. And then in grant days, which is like quite often, that like just is either like 80, 90, or like exceeds the capacity. And so the superchain is built so that as communities get big, you can have them have their own block space, but at the same time be collaborating. And so it's like clearly the time to do that. And so, yeah, it's been really exciting. It was also a coincidence. Honestly, we didn't plan it this way, but yesterday, basically 5 minutes before the World Chain announcement went live, we also hit 5 million org verifications. So that's not just 10 million people that have a World ID and have a wallet and are transacting, but it's also 5 million of those. So about half have the highest level of verification, which is the org. So it's super exciting to see the project work to continue accelerating. And so really the why we're doing World Chain right now is just to be able to keep up with that growth so that we can continue welcoming people at the pace that we are, and that for existing users, we can just continue having a great experience with low fees, fast transactions, reliable transactions. And so, yeah, super excited for that. And then obviously in classic Worldcoin fashion, the community had a few tricks up its sleeve to build the L2 in a really cool way that we can talk about a bit later.
Cool, very good. So let's move on a little bit and talk about, World Chain is built on OP Stack, and we'll talk more about OP Stack and Superchain in a bit. But what makes World Chain unique? And Tiago, you want to just continue? I think you're actually beginning to talk about that just a little bit.
Yeah, first thing I'll say is I got some questions yesterday with the launch, like, well, why OP stack? And he's like, well, the project has been running great on OP stack for the past 9 months. So it just makes sense to keep writing. Was working great. I think like that's part of it. But the other side of things is just like values alignment. And we'll probably talk a lot more about the superchain later. But like you're saying, I think there's also an interesting twist here, which is generally speaking, what we see is a lot of the problems that blockchains face today, right? Whether it's related to scalability and transaction throughput or high gas, it turns out that just like the rest of the internet, a lot of those are either caused or aggravated by bots. And Remco will be the first one to tell me like, well, look, Tiago, there's good bots. And like, I agree. There's like a ton of good bots, but there's also a lot of bots that like just aren't super productive for chains. And what ends up happening is like these bots are fighting for capacity, right? They're usually faster and willing to spend more money than normal people. And so they'll take up a bunch of the capacity of the chain. And then whatever is left actually goes to like normal people that just do a couple of transactions per month. And so for World Chain, we said like, well, there's this thing called the World ID protocol that sort of already solves that on the internet. Why don't we bring that to blockchain, right? What would that look like? And initially there's like two specific things. Basically, the way it'll work is you can use World Chain without having a World ID or anything like that. It's open, it's permissionless. Anyone can use it, even bots. But people that have a World ID can optionally use that World ID to verify their World Chain address. That will be a completely anonymous verification. It's protected through zero knowledge proofs. It's basically like adding a blue check mark to your addresses on World Chain. Now, addresses that have a blue check mark will get a couple of cool things. The first one is they will get priority block space. That basically just means that like when the chain is at capacity, your transactions will get processed faster, right? We want to make sure that transactions from real people that just do a handful of transactions a month are able to get through so they have that great experience. And if you are a bot or if you're a person that just, even if you're verified, uses the chain a lot, maybe you have to wait a little bit longer. So that's thing number one. And then thing number two, which is something that we've been piloting in World App and has been super successful, is verified humans also get a little bit of free gas, probably every month, but that we still need to figure out the final details on that. And that sounds simple, but it's actually super profound, because what that means is that when you first download a compatible wallet and when you're first going to start trying your first on-chain apps, you don't have to worry about learning what gas is. You don't have to worry about on-ramping funds and KYCing and figuring out how to do that and converting the tokens and then paying it. And you have all that friction. You can just get started, do a couple of transactions, and then if you become a power user and want to do more stuff, then you can actually on-ramp. And so I think the combination of those two things will be incredibly powerful. Alongside this topic of gas, the other thing that World Chain will have that will be interesting is while the native token will be ETH, and we thought it was very important to keep that ETH alignment and keep ETH as a main token, we also understand that a lot of World Chain users already have the Worldcoin token, right? Whether it's because usually they're receiving it in the shape of grants in countries where that is available. And so it's also going to be super easy to cover your gas with Worldcoin tokens. And so if you're one of those power users that is going to exceed what your free gas allowance gives you every month, but you already have some Worldcoin tokens, you can just very easily use those. And then again, you don't have to go through the trouble of on-ramping and whatnot. And so generally, as you zoom out, this is basically, as the title says, it is a blockchain for humans. And what that means is we just want something that is like super easy to use and super nice to use for like normal people that are just doing a couple of payments every week, and everything else just works like a normal blockchain for like power users or anyone that wants to automate stuff.
All right, very good. And I also want to bring in Liam. I want to hear from Liam as well. And really the question is, what will World Chain make possible? What does World Chain enable beyond, the description that Tiago just gave us?
Totally. One thing I'll say around that is that last year I spent a lot of time looking into why do people really use crypto and what are some of like the major areas where it's gotten adoption in the world. If you take a really sober look at it, and if you cut out the kind of quote unquote very on-chain people that are using the bleeding edge stuff like decentralized social or decentralized gaming, which is, still a very small but growing space, and you cut out a lot of the kind of speculation and mania around like meme coins and so on, there's this very specific kind of segment of usage that's happening around stablecoin adoption and access to kind of a better banking and financial system than what's otherwise available in the countries of people in places like Argentina or in Turkey or in Chile or in Venezuela. And I read tons and tons of like analysis reports and different reports at different places about why people are using these things. And it's a real kind of sector of crypto adoption that doesn't go up and down with bull and bear cycles. It just continues to grow. And it's hard to get exact numbers, but it's somewhere in the double digit, tens of millions of people globally are genuinely getting value from crypto, totally agnostic to speculation or any of the more novel use cases, strictly as a better bank, a better way to do commerce, a better way to lend their money, or to invest their money, or to at least have a hedge against inflation of their local currencies. And that really put a light bulb on my head to look at the sector overall. And what I noticed when I started looking really closely at WorldCoin was the exact places where this stablecoin penetration is really high is also where WorldCoin adoption is really growing very fast. And it just became really clear to me, if WorldCoin is able to go from, back then it was a way smaller number of millions of people, and that's crazy, it's only been a handful of months, but 10 million now up to maybe 100 million this year. And if it continues growing at this kind of exponential rate, it's a very significant percentage of the population. It could be kind of the gateway drug for taking these use cases and making them truly kind of like world scale. And so the question of why does World Chain need to exist for that? It's effectively, if it keeps growing at this rate, just fundamentally, it's going to have to scale. It's going to continue to hit these limits on throughput, and it needs a scaling partner for that. I don't know. My main take on it is just like WorldCoin is a very high potential bet on genuinely getting adoption of crypto in society, and World Chain is what's going to enable it to actually achieve that.
Very good. Yeah.
If I can just quickly jump in on this, Steven.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think Liam made a really important point that a lot of people are often surprised by. And by the way, I'm cutting the flow of this thing completely here, so sorry about that. But it's just, you saw this with, there's this very famous guy on Twitter a couple of weeks ago, Richard, bought the goat. This is someone that was just walking around the mall in a city, so WorldCoin. The WorldCoin booth, heard about it, downloaded World app, started playing with a wallet, eventually got his verification, started getting his WorldCoins, bought a goat with his WorldCoins, and World app is so cool. And then that went viral. But I think what that story shows is what you're saying, Liam, which is the WorldCoin project is not just about getting WorldCoin and World ID to people, right? It's about accelerating adoption of all of these technologies and primitives that we all really care about, and just taking it out into the world, right? And I think that the story of Richard is a perfect example of that. And WorldCoin just happens to be the catalyst for all of this. At this point, 10 million users, but hopefully a lot more very soon, are just getting access for the first time to all of these super important technologies that people have been building through Ethereum and different protocols, and that are now way more accessible thanks to the Superchain. So that's just the thing I would say. But back to you, Steven.
Yeah, no, and that's actually perfect, by the way. And so I'll even go a little bit further sideways on that, because I remember when the first time I heard about the WorldCoin project, I was at the Electric Coin Company, which is the primary developer of Zcash cryptocurrency. And we looked at the project. I mean, we just like everything in the crypto world, you keep up with developments and what's going on. And the takeaway that we had was probably a little bit more insightful, I think, not because we were particularly smart, just because we were having to deal with this ourselves daily, was the onboarding mechanism and the ability to reach people who might, to use some kind of classic terms, like the unbanked, like the people that can't go to their bank or KYC with an exchange and buy some crypto and get into it that way. But the onboarding mechanism, how you bring people into this world that you're trying to build that is, like a financial alternative to maybe mainstream finance. So anyway, with that, I'll zoom back out, get back on kind of our flow here. But thanks, Liam and Tiago, for that. That was excellent. But now what I want to shift gears to is talk a little bit more about Optimism and the Superchain. And no better person to do that on this call than Ryan. So Ryan, I'd love to get you engaged here. Can you just tell us a little bit about, for people that may not be familiar with kind of the Superchain thesis, what that is, why it makes sense for WorldCoin to build on the Superchain?
Yeah, absolutely. I know that we have a mixed bag of how familiar people are with blockchain tech and that whole sector. So, Optimism and particularly OP Labs, has created something called OP Stack that many other people are contributing to, test and prod base, a collection of different developers that continue to contribute and build upon the OP Stack. That is, and it may be very simple layman's term, is blockchain software out of the box. And so people use this blockchain to then go spin up their own and have their own, much like World Chain. It's the most used L2 blockchain software that's out there. And so people like Base and World Chain and Zora and Mode and many of these other big, what we call layer 2s are actually using the OP stack to build their own blockchains. The cool thing about this is what we have is called Superchain. So it's like, okay, well, what exactly is the Superchain? And really the Superchain, it kind of, it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And all those definitions are right in their own way. But at its core, it's basically teams that are building on the OP stack and they're contributing revenue to the Optimism Collective. And ultimately, that revenue is going towards open source development and funding open source development. And I think we all could agree that's like never been more critical in tech than it is today. And so something like World Chain, when they're like, hey, we're going to build on the OP stack and we're going to be part of the super chain, that's a big part of what their commitment is to contributing back to this idea of open source development and kind of putting some of their revenue back into the Optimism Collective. The other thing about what is the superchain is it's just this common standard that all these L2s operate on. Ultimately, what that will allow for us to do is create like much more frictionless user journeys between these L2s. I think if you've ever tried to navigate all of these different blockchains, it's tough. You've got to bridge assets between these things. Your assets are scattered across all these different L2s. And it can be quite complicated. And so having this like shared standard across all of these chains using all these blockchains being on OP stack is going to be really advantageous long term. And again, it's already, when you look at the transactions happening across all the L2s, a vast majority of them are Optimism, OP stack powered blockchains that are driving those transactions. And World Chain will be no different. Having 10 million users come on chain and all the stuff that WorldCoin is doing is so incredible. And WorldCoin started as an app on OP mainnet, and it was doing a meaningful amount of the activity on OP mainnet. It was time to graduate to its own blockchain. It warrants having its own blockchain to be able to scale and take all the demand and growth that WorldCoin's experiencing. And so like we're just like so excited to see this next step in this evolution. But yeah, this is an important part of what OP Stack is and what the Superchain is. And it's fun to be able to collaborate with the team as we continue to expand the ecosystem in the Superchain.
Very good. Yeah. And the things you went over are the things that are like super attractive to us in general. And about moving to Optimism in the first place is just kind of the ethos alignment of open source software, open source protocols, multiple teams working together to improve the stack. I remember talking with Ben Jones several times, and Ben, for those that may not know, super sharp person who is heavily involved in the law of chains in defining that. And he and I had some really good conversations along with Remco most recently a couple of weeks ago about the law of chains. But Ben used a term, which I really loved, by the way, and I've used it every time I possibly could. So of course I'm going to throw it in here today, which is the homogeneity of block space, right? So this like, a user or an application developer can move between what's called OP chains and Superchain vernacular very frictionlessly. They can make the best choice for their app based on the app chain that they might want to run on. What you preserve across those OP chains is things like interop or cross-chain messaging. And it's just, we're super excited about it. Super excited to build on OP Stack, be part of the Superchain, and then also be able to innovate on the edge and contribute back to OP Stack proper, if you will. Yeah, so talking about commitment to the Superchain, Tiago, you want to talk a little bit about our commitment to the Superchain? I'll let you pop in there.
Yeah, of course. A couple of people that have been around with the project might remember that there was actually a blog post last summer where the project in general, the Worldcoin community, had already committed to collaborating with the Superchain. And that was, honestly, this whole thing started with Jesse last year, even before Base got announced and it launched. Jesse's from Base, is a personal friend of mine, and he was the one that like killed me actually on the idea. I remember there was one day that he was visiting the office, and I think Remco might have been around visiting that day, and he was telling us about this idea of, I think Coinbase might do this L2, but we should probably do it like all together, and it was just really cool to see how that idea just continued to morph and evolve through then the collaboration with Optimism, and we met with Liam and the rest of the OP team. And so it was already since last summer when we decided that the project would launch on Optimism. As Remco was hinting at the beginning, there was already an inclination that like, hey, we generally think that not only the stack is good, but that there's some shared values here. And I think that is super important. And Jesse did a much better job talking about that than I can do in a podcast recently. So I'll just defer to him on that. But generally, I think that the Superchain goes beyond a stack. It goes around community of projects that have a shared vision of what crypto can mean to the world and what all these technologies can do for the world. And we just choose to work together rather than against or in competition to get there faster, right? And make sure that what we all care about actually happens. And so that's from everything, obviously on the technical side of things, contributing to funding in ways that each contributor can. But in general, it's just really cool to see this group of projects that just are working together in a positive sum game. And because the goal is bigger than ourselves, right? Like the goal is not which L2 is competing for the one use case and who has technically a little bit more users or TVL. We don't care about that. We care about like the missions working out. And so it's just very cool to be part of a community that has that mindset.
All right, very good. Yeah, just a quick one. Go ahead.
I just want to back that up quickly. It is there's just no way, like the problem is so large, building like the financial infrastructure for the whole world. It's so ambitious, and there's just no way that a single organization could possibly pull that off. And this is the thing that really sold me on the Superchain vision. It's not so much the Superchain, but it's the super family behind it of people that are incredibly talented and working really hard on making this work. And this is the only way it could possibly scale.
Super family, I like that. Great term, by the way. Yeah, so great answers, Tiago and Remco. Again, quick housekeeping note, we've got a few good questions coming in already, but if you have any questions for us, we'll have time at the end. Just again, drop those in the Twitter thread. But now I want to talk about, so we kind of laid the groundwork. What is World Chain? What's the thought around World Chain? Why are we doing it? We talked about Superchain, OP Stack, Optimism, and kind of that general vision there. So I want to kind of move practically into our last section of like building World Chain, which I can respond to as well. But so we, World Chain is announced. We announced it yesterday. Again, if you missed that, there's a great blog on it, worldcoin.org/blog. You can go read that. But after the announcement, kind of what's next on the path to launching World Chain. And Tiago, I'll let you go first, and then I can also chime in with some specifics as well.
Of course, like we said, the first reason why World Chain is happening is because the product is growing. So we want to get this out as soon as possible before we run out of space. Because I'm sure we're also not being super nice neighbors to everyone else that has awesome projects on OP mainnet. So what that means is, while the chain did not launch yesterday, because you have to give just the ecosystem time to catch up and deploy anything that needs to be deployed, we will generally try to move really fast with that. So what that means is we're actually going to skip testnet that a couple of projects have done. At this point, honestly, just like the OP stack is de-risked in a way in which we think that other projects took care of that for us. And so we are going to deploy something that is going to be called developer preview, which will actually be hopefully the real network that will go live later in the summer. And that will be so that developers can actually start deploying the different pieces that the ecosystem will need. And then the plan is later this summer to actually then open up that network for everyone else. That will be the moment of launch. At that time is also when all of World App users will be migrated from OP mainnet to World Chain. So that is 10 million users or 10 plus, whatever we're at by the time of the summer. That will just be seeding that chain. And then obviously every other wallet that supports World Chain will be able to go live that day. And so we expect a pretty packed timeline between now and then. I won't spoil too many specific dates. You can just stay up to date on Twitter. But we'll try to move through this as quickly as we can. There's a large set of partners that have already been able to commit to join the World Chain. There's many others that need to go through governance process or things like that. And so we want to give those communities time to actually get things together. But yeah, generally speaking, super excited about the launch later this summer.
Very good. And yeah, just to talk about some of the practicalities around the protocol itself, as Tiago mentioned, we're not going to have a test net per se. We'll have what developer preview, dev gated mainnet, whatever you'd like to call it. But the network that we launch will become our mainnet for World Chain. Right now, and we have been running for some time, different infrastructure providers looking at also running it ourselves, but that's neither here nor there. The chain will be the chain regardless of the actual infrastructure. And so that's kind of our main focus at the moment. We're also bootstrapping into the Optimism core development process, which has been a great experience. You have just a lot of great builders on those calls. And those are the things that Remco was referring to in general, where the collective vision for everyone building to some degree in the crypto world in general, but specifically in the superchain, goes way beyond what a single project can do. And it's just that collective energy that's working on these things around scalability that we're very excited about and very happy to be a part of.
Well, I can add one thing just on that in terms of
go ahead, Liam.
Something I think is very exciting about the kind of process of World Chain on Optimism is that it's going to be a massive sort of a forcing function to accelerate and ship some like really critical features of the superchain. So as in one example, eventually on the superchain, there's going to be native interoperability, which will be a really killer feature, because if anyone's familiar with moving assets and messages across chains today, you need to go through these kind of third-party intermediaries like Layer 0 and other things like that. But a really exciting thing about a future where all the superchain chains are interoperable, that's just natively built in to Optimism. And there's going to be so many use cases where like a base user might want to engage with World Chain, or a World Chain user might want to go into Base or Zora or OP Mainnet or any of these sorts of use cases. And if you have tens of millions of people eagerly trying to get access to blockchain functionality, this will be a huge motivator for that. So I'm looking forward to poking a lot of the OP product team about these things.
Cool, very good. And Ryan, you want to give us like just a quick update on what's coming up for Optimism itself?
Yeah, I won't tease too much, Stephen. There's a lot. Like, I think we're going to have a very busy summer in the best possible way. I think one thing that's like very important and the thing that we've been tracking as an industry is we all care about this path to decentralization. And there's a wonderful third-party company called L2Beat that keeps kind of the industry held accountable on this path to decentralization, which is amazing. And they have different requirements of how they look at what decentralization means. And right now, we have something called permissionless fault proofs that are in testnet that we're rolling out this summer. And ultimately, OP Stack will get to stage 1, which is a huge milestone, not for just OP Stack, but for the industry as well. And obviously, World Chain will benefit from that being part of the superchain. And so I think everybody here takes decentralization very serious, and we're really excited about it. And so I just wanted to share that this summer will be fun, that we get to that point. And when I say we, everybody in the superchain, including World Chain, and ultimately we pay, a path forward to stage 2 in 2025. So really excited. There's a lot of other things that we're doing that will contribute towards the OP stack that we'll release. But that one I'm probably most excited for, and I think is most applicable to the broader World Chain efforts.
All right. Very good. No, and again, we've been working with the Optimism teams for quite a while, and just having some visibility into the things that are coming are exciting for us. The current state of OP Stack and Superchain is very exciting, but some of the things being worked on, what's coming next is super exciting as well. So let's move to, we have a couple questions. You still have time to get those in if you want to drop another one in there. So let's see. Question, I'm going to let Remco take the first one. Why is the World Chain important at this state of Worldcoin? So I'll pass that one to Remco.
The short answer is that we need more block space. If we keep growing the rate we're growing on OP mainnet, we will not be able to handle all of the users' transactions anymore.
Yeah, exactly. One thing you have to get ahead of is scalability. Like you can't, and we're already bumping into scalability challenges on occasion, but you can't wait until you have a scalability crisis to start thinking about addressing scalability. So absolutely perfect answer, by the way. And then we have another question that came in. I'll let Tiago take this one. We've already kind of answered it, but I think it bears just repeating. It says, will the new chain you were developing have a test stage like a WLD testnet to interact with dApps or dApps, however you want to say it? And Tiago, I'll let you answer that in the space, but I'll let you just repeat it for those that might not have been on at the time.
Yes, we're going to try to skip that stage, which will be a fun adventure. So we're going to have a stage of the chain, of the network, that will be called a developer preview. That is coming in a few weeks. And that will hopefully be the actual network that will eventually be open. So this will be a mainnet network that will be just catered for developers that want to get access to start playing with some of the primitives of the chain, or need to deploy important parts of the ecosystem. And then eventually in the summer, that is the same network that will be opened up for everyone else. And super excited about that. Super excited to get World Chain in the hands of everyone as soon as possible. and to continue building with the whole OP and Superchain community.
All right, very good. That was all our questions. I think we're actually coming up pretty close to time. So we hit the time again really well. First, huge shout out to everyone that joined the space today. We appreciate all the interest in Worldcoin and World Chain, and be looking for more of these, around the project in general, but also World Chain. We'll be talking more specifically and more technically about some of the developments and, updated timelines and things of that nature. But I also want to thank Ryan from the Optimism Collective, Liam, Tiago, and Remco for hopping on the space today. This has been one I've been looking forward to for quite some time. I've just been really super excited to be able to announce World Chain and then kind of have this corresponding space. I really love these that kind of flow like a conversation, literally just like we're sitting around the same table, just talking about it with everyone. But again, thanks everyone that joined the space. Thanks for those that might catch the recording. And yeah, again, thanks Ryan, Liam, Tiago, and Remco for making this an awesome space today. So with that, I'll let everyone go, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.